Hey y'all, welcome back to The Leap. We're just going to get started here in just a second. I'm Rachel Renock. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're going to get this interview going. Get her up on stage and have a great conversation. I'm excited for our guest today. We're going to talk a bunch about community, about how to build community, how to leverage community, all the things. So I'm super excited to get Tina up and running. We'll get up and go in here just a second, and thanks for your patience for those of you who are joining us. Let me get our guest up on stage here. All right.
Oh my God,
Nice.
hi!
We did it. Wow. Hey,
I
it's been so
know!
long.
How
I'm so
are
happy to see
you?
you. I'm great. I'm super excited to chat today. I feel like you've just like your business has evolved so much. So I'm really,
Oh my
excited
God,
to
you
touch on a bunch of the topics that we're going to
too!
chat about today.
Where where are you physically
Full
located
software
these
now. Who
days?
knew?
In Nashville? I'm
I'm in
in
Nashville,
Denver these
actually,
days.
Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We love we love
Yeah.
a smaller tier city. That's where I'm at
Yeah.
too. It's
Well, thanks
great.
for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna do a quick little intro for folks that are not familiar, and
Yes.
then we'll get right into it if that works for you. So thanks, folks, for those of you who are joining us. I'm Rachel Renock. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wethos, which is a software platform that basically helps you take the guesswork out of starting and scaling your freelance business. So we make it really easy to price projects, bill your clients, and then if you're collaborating with other people, send peer-to-peer payments. Every month or so, I interview a different creative entrepreneur who has taken the leap to start their own business, usually something within the freelance space. And this week's guest, I'm super excited about. Tina, we've known each other for a couple of years now. We've had like these like virtual bonding sessions, which I'm super stoked about. But Tina is an amazing community builder. She's a creator. She focuses on the future of work, mental health, personal development. Her venture, Space to Grow, which
Yes.
used to be called Strategist, it curates programs.
Hey, been
Love
a
it. Yeah, I
minute.
love the new name, by the way. Yeah. Gang's all here. Gang's all here. But Space to Grow is a super cool company. It really focuses on building these like programs and communities that can foster a more intentional and meaningful, work-life balance and experience. Um, Really amazing concept personally because I feel like we desperately need that, and the world is just like moving more and more in this direction. So definitely needed. But Tina's actually a very respected strategist and visionary. She comes from a ton of really well-known agencies, extensive experience, RGA, Big Spaceship, really cool agencies, and really excited about your mission to unlock human potential. Tina, thank you so much for joining us, and I'd love for you to just kick us off. Like, tell us sort of the less glossy version of your journey to freelance and what led you to sort of start
Yeah,
Space to
thank
Grow
you
and how
so
you
much
got
for
here.
having me and for that amazing intro. So I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I actually made it my life goal to move to New York City since I was 14. Did everything possible to make it happen. Fast forward, made it happen, started working in New York City in advertising, and I was a strategist, started as a social strategist. And 4 years into it, I started to feel like um, I wasn't sure whether the traditional path of rising through the ranks was quite right for me. And I started then doing a ton of different side projects. I've always been someone who just like to like make things, and for me that meant bringing people together. So I've hosted a ton of things, from like a brunch series to a speaker series at WeWork. Back when WeWork was like a thriving company, those days. Yeah.
RIP.
And then ultimately, so I also started a podcast, and then ultimately made strategist. And the intention of starting strategist was just like, I felt like I was really lost in my career. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, there must be other people that want to talk about it. And also at the same time, I've been to a lot of industry events, and I always just feel like it's always like you have to be like really buttoned up and like impress the person next to you and need to like put on this face to be a certain way, when I'm just like, I just want to create space to bring people together in a way that's like really really like soothing, and I can feel really seen, and people also feel really seen in this space. And we'll also talk about things like imposter syndrome and important topics that we might not talk about at work. And we also did things like deep dive into subcultures, did a ton of really amazing, just really fun IRL gatherings. And now in retrospect, when I think about it, like those side projects that I did have always been things that fueled me and like gave me energy even after a really long day at work. And that made me realize like, okay, there's like something here. I just like love doing this. And then the pandemic hit. And that made a lot of people just like question everything in their lives, me included.
Oh yeah.
And by then I was doing strategist for 4 years. I was at a job where I headed up marketing in an agency, and I was already like thinking about what I wanted next. And I think that's just how the universe works. I was going through visa transitions. I couldn't work for 10 months. And during that 10 months, I really like wanted to figure out, okay, like, and I'm also somebody who I just like really need to live very authentically to my values, and like work in a very authentic way that's true to me. And I'm like, I just want to, I've always like, I've known that I wanted to be my own boss. I've known that I wanted to just like do my own thing. And I'm like, let's just like give this a shot. And so I started freelancing last year, and I freelanced 50% of my time. And then I worked on strategists, which was what Space to Grow was called back then, 50% of the time, and just kind of like try different things. And for freelancing, it was like mostly community strategy with like early stage startups,
Mm-hmm.
and some artists. Actually, I worked on a project called Slimy Oddity on Instagram. I love them. It was really fun to work with them. And then at the same time, I love just helping people with their lives and their careers. 'Cause I just like feel like you have one of them, and we've been told that you need to work in this like one very linear specific way, but it doesn't need to be like this. And increasingly with like technology advancement, with culture, there's many different ways that you can be working, and we can imagine new ways to be making money. And so I was like, I think it's time to rebrand strategist. It's been a long time coming. I've known I wanted to do that since like year one of strategist, and then finally put Space to Grow into the world last month, and am now like building Space to Grow. And last year also launched this program called the Freelance Starter Pack, which is all about helping people transition from full-time to
Yeah.
freelance. So doing a ton of just like higher value items and experimenting with different formats, and really just like helping people work more intentionally in a more meaningful way, and expanding what's possible. So that's my spiel. I feel like I went super long.
That's amazing. I mean, thanks for sharing that. I feel like it's so needed, especially in like these types of careers. I think especially like in advertising, and for people like strategists who it's not super clear, right? Like how does my maybe day-to-day job, or if I'm in a salaried position, like how does that translate into an independent track? Like what does that look like? And that's like a really, it's a big mystery, honestly, that I think a lot of people are going through, and especially in the last couple of years. I'm curious, like digging into that a little bit, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers for people like taking the leap in that regard? When they're trying to go their own way, and
I think
like what's holding
what
people
you
back?
said just now, when you alluded to, it's like feeling like it's such a wild west, because we've been conditioned to think work looks like a corporate career, and there's this path, and we get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and you keep climbing, and that's what work looks like. And then like there's also these advice that you would get that's like, if you have a gap in your resume, you're like totally screwed, and it's like not a
Oh
good
yeah.
idea. So like there's all these like things that's been told to us for the longest time, and this idea of freelancing. And a lot of people who that I talk to that go through the program is like, this feels like such a wild west. I don't even know where to start. And then you see these
Yeah.
people who like have been there and done that, and it's like, oh, like they figured it out, but like I have no idea what the process looked like. And it's just like any sort of, whether it is entrepreneurship or freelancing, often we only see the end product and we only see what successes looks like,
Yep.
and we don't even realize that there were all these like things that they need to learn along the way. So I think like the mindset shift of this like one linear path to this like blank page is like a very big leap for a lot of people. And actually it was a big leap for
Mm.
me, especially the
Yeah.
financial part, because I was like, I only knew how to make money like that was like paycheck. Oh yeah, it's like
There you
my
are.
Instagram, like there's a
We're
time
good.
limit thing that I put on my Instagram so that I'm not like doom scrolling. Yeah, that like
Oh,
came up.
off your phone.
um what was I saying? uh oh, the Wild West. Yeah, financial.
People just like, yeah,
Yeah,
like going from like
and
a really
financial, which was like
linear path
a
to not
hurdle for
knowing like,
me because I was like, I only know how to make money every 2 weeks, or like the paycheck every 2 weeks. How am I gonna make money without this like consistent paycheck?
yeah.
So I think that also comes with working through money mindset, your money traumas, getting more familiar with your finances before going freelance and going independent. I actually had a pretty like not great relationship with money. I tend to avoid it and not think about it. And I actually now I'm very proud of myself of having a much better relationship with money. And I'm just like, I'm confronting it and I feel more comfortable with it. And of course, it's like still a journey that I'm on every day. So the financial bit is scary for a lot of people. And so it's like the stability of financial bit, but also like talking about money. So like learning about how to figure out their rates
Mhm.
and the negotiation part, whatever it is, the packaging part. So definitely the financial stuff. Um, and then just in general, I think mindset is just huge. I think
Yeah.
because when you're an entrepreneur, like I think freelancers are entrepreneurs. Like when you, yeah, like when you're a freelancer, you own a
100%.
small
No
business.
doubt.
And when you start a small business, when you have your own venture, it's not like this immediate thing where you're gonna like see return on day one. Like there's few months
Yeah.
of like investment time where you're building the thing up, you're investing time on your marketing, on your website, figuring out what clients you want to work with, whatever it is. So you might not see the immediate like money immediately. So
Hmm.
sometimes that's like scary for a lot of people. So you need that sort of mindset shift, going from scarcity mindset and all the fear stuff to an abundance mindset and knowing how to
Yeah.
continue on, because those like doubts and fears, I still get them all the time, but now it's like I know how to deal with these things when they like pass through my brain, and I know how to talk to them and I know how to continue on and just like keep going even though those fears come
Hmm.
up. So yeah, so like I think those are top.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
not big barriers at all. I mean, totally seems
Yeah.
seems totally
I
fine
mean,
and
like,
reasonable.
honest.
Like,
Yeah.
that's like, yeah, it's tough. I mean, it is. We hear the same thing a lot. And you know what's interesting to me too, that you said, like, what I'm hearing too is that it has not even anything
Yeah.
necessarily to do with how senior you are in your career. Like, you may be a very senior creative director, but if you're going freelance for the first time, the learning curve to that business and like running and growing that business is still
Yeah.
as steep as anything else. Like regardless of like how many years maybe you've been in like an agency or in the industry, and we definitely hear that, and that translation around salary and money is super scary for people. I'm curious. The other thing I was curious to touch on was like so obviously you have a big focus on community. I think one of the biggest advantages and disadvantages
Mm,
for a lot of people who go freelance is that if you come from the agency world, you typically kind of have a network that you've built up
mm,
from being
mm,
in agency world, and network can lead to a lot of
mhm,
like opportunities, freelance opportunities, other things like that. If you don't come from a traditional background, you are sort of trying to build your freelance business while trying to also build up
mm,
your professional network,
mm,
which is a
mm.
blurry line in and of itself. Like those are sort of one and the same at the end of the day. But I'm curious, like when it comes to community, what do you think? Like, what do you think are the different sort of
Yeah.
stages of that freelance journey that you've seen, and how does community sort of play a part in all the different, basically the life cycle, as somebody is evolving from, doing stuff on the side all the way through to maybe getting to the point of,
Yeah, that's
hiring
a
other
great
people
question.
potentially?
I think so. Everyone has a different starting point, and even I think when you were describing this different scenario, like there are people who maybe are 10 years into their agency career, and they're trying to go freelance, and we actually talk about like starting with your safe zone because like if you're 10 years into it, you probably have some sort of network to start with, so like starting there. But if you're someone who's like really starting from scratch and have like not much of like a working network, I would say like work can like these connections and clients can really come from anywhere. So like start somewhere, whether it is like figuring out the niche of your offering, the niche of the industry that you want to serve. And so for example, like if you want to work with F&B, like food and beverage startup, like startup D2C companies, then like you then would figure out like, okay, where are these potential clients hanging out? Are there communities that are for those kind of potential clients? And then being active in those communities and
Mm,
start like, I guess like networking there. Um, and another thing that that you could do is also like network and create community with other freelancers, other collaborators, maybe on Wethos, and or other like freelance networks. We all because you just like
thanks,
never
thanks.
know where your collaborators come from, and a lot of times like these are how
Yeah,
like I if I'm a freelancer, I'm like, oh my plate is full, like I can refer you to this client that just like reach out to me. So you never know where these things can happen.
totally.
And also I would say the most like what I've seen in the most like successful slash like most consistent freelancers, and I say success in a way that is like they have work, they've been freelancing for like quite a few years. Oftentimes they work as a collective and like work with the friend group that they consistently
Mm,
go back to. And some of them operate as like an official collective that like, they like, I don't know, brand themselves unofficially or like have like a fun website, whatever it is. Or there's this like unofficial collective where they are people that just like get each other, they like working together, they refer each other on different work projects, or like they bring each other in on specific projects because they have like skills that complement each other's skills or whatever it is. So that's what I've seen a lot of
mhm.
freelancers like moving towards. And also some of the, I would say
Yeah,
like the happiest freelancers like, that I've talked to often operate in that way of like working with this collective of people.
mm,
And I was also talking to a friend, she was like, I'm just like, I just want to work with friends. Like, I want to like pay my
yeah,
friends. I want to collaborate. I want my friends to, we just like have this like friend economy almost. And I was actually thinking about it today and I'm like, that's just kind of like the boys club. And just like the boys club is a thing because like they go golf, they just give business to each other. It's this like very closed thing. And we don't need to make, and we can
yep,
like, it doesn't need to be closed off and like like what the boys club what their values are, whatever it is, we can create our own version of like a friends economy boys club where we get to
yeah,
like work with people that share our values and we want to just like collaborate and do things with. Yeah.
yeah. Totally. Totally. We see so much of this activity. We have a joke that like most agencies are three freelancers under a trench coat. Like that's how so many people
Yeah.
are operating. And it's so interesting to see how much more prevalent it's gotten, I think, over the last couple of years. I also find that to your point, right? Like when you're working with a small group of people or your friends, you're combining the power of
Mm,
like your shared networks. So people are constantly like bringing each other opportunities. We say like
yeah.
freelancers who hire other freelancers basically, and that like they're forming
Hmm.
these virtual studios is what we call them, which is basically where you are like forming these collectives. And I think it's really interesting to me that so many of the sort of like platforms even to date, like the marketplaces, are inherently causing
Hmm.
freelancers to compete with one another. But at the end of the day, like that's not the natural behavior actually of this community. Like this community is collaborative. Like people want to help each other. They want to share
Hmm.
resources. They want to share leads. They want to bring jobs to their own communities, like
Yeah.
create jobs for their own communities. And so I think that when we get into this, we've gotten into this sort of like really competitive atmosphere where it's like, well, if you won't do it for
Yeah.
$5, I'll find somebody who will. And that just destroys like kind of the fabric of like the natural, community oriented approach in which there's actually more for everybody if we're sharing like with each other essentially. So I feel like community is it's such a powerful thing in general, but I think for this audience or these entrepreneurs specifically, it actually is like your network is your business is your network, right? And it's just
Yeah.
a very intertwined
And
thing.
I think there's a reason why people are like, people want to be at their full-time jobs because of the community part too, because,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that
yeah,
community is not necessarily like what you've made, and a lot of times these environments aren't made for you, but there is that element that people are like,
totally.
oh, like, but if I go freelance, like, I'm not going to have that. And but the thing is, like,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
make your own, but also there are other communities that are also more value aligned to how you want to show up and how you want to work, that exists in the freelance space too, and in these like other indie spaces. Yeah, so like, yeah, agreed.
yeah. I know it's like it's such an interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting sort of paradigm shift over the next couple of years because it did used to be that like you couldn't really do big meaningful
Yeah.
projects unless you were in an agency, like a traditional agency. And with the rise of technology, and you can shoot 4K on your iPhone now, and you can send payments in an instant, and there's all this stuff that didn't exist like 10 years ago. I feel like that's going to be we're about to go through the shift
Yeah.
that e-commerce went through, frankly,
Yeah,
is,
I'm
is what
so
I think is about
excited
to
for
happen.
entrepreneurs like you and just like people who are building for future work. Because I think a big hurdle for people also of going indie is like, I'm not going to get insurance. Like, how am I going to, like, what does accounting look like? What does taxes look like? What does this like support system? What does benefits look like? And all these things that comes with the full-time job, but there's increasingly more startups like Wethos and all these different companies that are like trying to build that foundation for the indie workforce. So I can see like 3 years, 5 years, though all of those things are going to exist, and we can be an independent freelancer, consultant, whatever it is, whatever you want, fractional CMO, whatever you want to call yourself. That you will have that foundation that is currently being built too.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it's going to open up to so many opportunities for independents to compete with the big agencies who are frankly like getting a lot of the business. Like billions and billions of dollars are going into these huge, top five holding companies basically. And I think that with the rise of technology, like we can just change the tides completely. As they say, like arm the rebels, right? Like give them the tools to compete and be able to really win bigger, more meaningful projects with each
Yeah,
other,
and I
which I
think
think is going to be
also
really
increasing
powerful.
people are rethinking what a company and what the goal of a company is, other than the goals of
Yeah.
capitalism and like high growth, hockey stick growth being like the one and only monopoly of like your industry. Like, I think
Hmm.
increasingly there are people who are like, they want to create lifestyle businesses. They want to create medium-sized businesses because they want to create a
Yeah.
lifestyle that works for them and for their employees. So for a lot of people that's going freelance, like that's also the people that they want to serve. So with like the increase in entrepreneurship for like products, whatever, like this means these mid-sized companies, there are also these freelancers and consultants that like want to work for these sort of companies too.
Yeah, yeah, there is. I feel like there's this like emerging class of businesses, online businesses that are not trying to be
Yeah.
like the next Uber, but are just trying to, yeah, like create a sustainable business where they
Yeah.
can like design their own lifestyle basically around it. And that is like a huge unlock. I mean, how powerful would that be? The half the US workforce projected to
Yeah.
be freelance by 2027. Like the majority of the workforce will be freelance, which is crazy. And I feel like we're really just on the precipice of carving out kind of like a whole new way of designing a
Mm,
career. It's a very different time I feel like we're transitioning into. um Question, before we get to our last question, I have one more question about the community side of things because I've seen the word community get thrown around a ton. And I think like every company, every startup tries to build a community, everyone's trying to tap into community, like, it's a broad term, I guess. And so what I was curious about is like, what do you find is sort of the key motivator for members of these communities to engage? Like, how do you think about building
Yeah.
value into these communities, like sort of from day one? Because I think everyone's sort of got fatigue. Everybody's trying to get more engagement, and like it just seems like the internet is increasingly becoming
Yeah.
robots. I
Yeah.
don't know. But like, yeah, like how do you sort of spark that
Yeah.
and
I
think about
think
it in an
let's
intentional
start by
way?
defining community. There's a, yeah, because as you
Amen.
said, community could just like mean so many things these days. It's being just like thrown around. So there's a
Totally.
difference between your audience versus your community. So your audience
Mm,
and you as a brand or a creator or a maker, whatever you are, you have a one-to-one relationship with your audience. And with your community, there is a bi-directional relationship. So you can think of it this way. Like if I'm a YouTuber, I'm a
mm,
creator, I make videos, and everyone that watches my videos is my audience. And in the subsection of that audience, there could be a community where these people have a relationship with each other, and a lot of times they're the people that
mm,
it's facilitated
mm.
by.
You're getting blocked out again. Your Instagram's yelling at you.
Blocked again. So sorry.
Don't you hate it when like your computer starts telling you what to do
Yeah,
like too much
yeah,
and you're like,
actually.
stop, like I hate this.
But yeah, so bi-directional relationship facilitated by the brand or the creator. So it's like a bi-directional thing. So how I
Mm,
approach community, I mean, I put on my strategy hat with my strategy background. So I first come up with
yeah.
hypothesis of what these community members need. And I create things for them so that they can come along and I can bring them together for a reason and make something that is really special for them. And at the same time, on the other side, it's important to also talk to them all the time and just like, yes, I have some
Mm,
hypotheses because also like I'm part of the demo that I'm serving, but there are also things that I probably don't know that they're going
right.
through. And it's important to just like have your boots on the ground and really, really understand who your community is, what, why they join your community, what they find valuable in your community, and like you as a brand, what is your role in their lives for this community, and like be able to then create
Hmm.
those sort of experiences so that they can keep coming back and have a reason to come back. And I think a lot of times, like with anything that is in our capitalistic society, like the more the merrier, the bigger the merrier, but like that's not always the case. I actually find smaller communities really valuable, and I'd love to also create
Mm,
small intimate spaces because I like just having like these experiences where people can truly have deep conversations with each other, where people can like truly connect instead of being overwhelmed on this like server that has like a million people and you're just like, what is happening, and there's a million people. So for me, I think like also I think consistency is also super important. Like any
mm.
sort of venture, I feel like sometimes it's like people are like, I did it for 3 days and like nothing's happening. But like no, like you need to create that trust, like you need to be consistently showing up. And I think that consistency of showing up and knowing that and creating that trust with your community members is also huge. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I've never heard of anyone describe it that way in terms of like, but it makes total sense in terms of like
Yeah.
audience being like a one-to-one, like me to you, versus the community is actually where the people themselves are building these interpersonal connections, and how that goes down. Sometimes it's organically because of the topic. Maybe, Tumblr, I feel like, is like a really great example of how people just like crowd used to at least like
Yeah.
crowd around like these really niche kind of topics that like really built a lot of, as you would say, like the bi-directional
Yeah.
sort of relationships. um and I think that, yeah, I don't think too many people are thinking, enough people are really thinking about it that way, and that like, what's my role in being the facilitator of how these people engage with one another versus like how do I
Yeah.
engage with them. um
Yeah, I
that's
think a
sort of the
lot of
disconnect there that I'm hearing
times,
from you.
especially brands, when they make community, they try to make it about the brand. But like when you make community, like it's not
Yeah.
about you. It's about the people. So like don't try to make yourself the star. Like you need to make your community members the star and like figure out how to
Hmm.
like connect them, facilitate. You're just a facilitator. Like you're not the superstar of this
Yeah.
scenario. You're not the main character.
You're not the main character. Sorry. Amazing. Well, before we hop off, I have one more question. There's a lot of folks out there who are clearly like thinking about taking the leap, or maybe they're, being sort of taking the leap not by choice. A lot of stuff going on in the economy. What advice do you have for those people who are in the process of doing that? Any parting words of
Oh,
wisdom?
parting words of wisdom. I mean, I think one of the things that I think it's important. I mean, I talk about mindset a lot, but I think with any sort of transition, it's important to, this is a line from Space to Grow, it's go inward for alignment, outward for inspiration, and sideways for support. And I think the
Nice.
reason why I rebranded Strategist to Space to Grow is because I think when we are in our day-to-day autopilot mode, we don't make space for ourselves to go inward, to even question the default, to just ask ourselves, like, what do we even want? To just like
Hmm.
figure out, if I were to like dream big and truly do what I want to do, like what would that look like? We don't spend time thinking about that. And I
Yeah.
think spending that time to go inward, to whether it is like reflective questions on where you want to head, or like working through some of your like money mindset stuff, or your internal like doubt blockers, whatever it is, internal work is like so important. And I said, when I say I'll work for inspiration, for me, a big unlock for me was when I realized that people that I've always looked up to were creative entrepreneurs, people who like went rogue, did their own thing, and
Mm.
just kind of like did things differently. I looked up, I love like Chef's Table. I love like hearing stories about chefs or like creative entrepreneurs, like artists. PS shout out to Rick Rubin's art, like his book recently, have been an amazing. It's a part of my morning ritual in the past month of like reading a chapter every day. So like I went for inspiration and just like
Nice.
community, sideways for support. A lot of times, a big hurdle for freelancers is not having people who believe in what they want to do, because maybe they're in a more traditional environment, and
Yeah.
that's not the fault of their friends or their family, whatever it is. That's just like their reality. But if you want to be a freelancer and take a different path, you also need to surround yourself with people who like believe in that path that you want to go into. You just need to like surround yourself with people like that, because sometimes when things are tough and you're alone, it's hard and things get hard.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like a lot of times people like, whether it is going client side or going freelance, it seems like when you don't know what it's about, it seems like the grass is greener. But I think it's more about like choosing your poison.
Mm.
Like there's ups and downs for everything, so you just need to like know yourself and like what your values are, what's important to you, and which poison you want to take, and what will make you happiest.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that's really important. I feel like the inward reflection and like doing
Mm,
that work to unpack that stuff can honestly,
yeah,
not doing it can really hold you back. And doing
yeah,
it can really speed up your process, honestly. Like it's an accelerant and it's also a barrier, and it's sort of your choice whether or not you like which way you're gonna
yeah,
let
yeah,
that go. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Shout out
So I think that's
to
really,
community, to
really important
coaches,
advice.
therapists. Work through all your stuff so that you can accelerate. Yeah, do your best
Anything
work.
that works. Yeah. Amazing. So, Tina, if people want to follow along, if they want to join Space to Grow, if they want to check things out,
Yeah,
like where's the best place for them to find you?
follow this handle that is collabing with this live right now, spacegrow.world. My personal Insta is my name, Tina Yip. I don't post that much on there except for like my readings and what I'm reading. And
Hey,
yeah, yeah,
could
yeah,
you always use that? Always use the
yeah.
reps.
And website is spacetogrow.world. Feel free to slide into my DMs anytime. I'm very open to just chatting with anyone. And shout out to Wethos for building us into this building an additional foundation for this future of work that we're heading. So thank you, Weethos.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to post a recap of this on the feed, and definitely check out Tina and check out all the work that she's been doing. If you're feeling isolated out there and you're feeling like I'm not doing it right or what's going on or it feels wrong, like just know that like we all feel like that. So you're not alone, and that's super important. We'll be back next month with another episode of The Leap. Tina, thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for
Have a
joining
good
us. Have
night.
a good night, everybody.